It's an exciting day for our committee. We will start with a economic development overview from the Salina community, an economic development progress report from Renee Dexler, who spells Renee correctly. Thank you for that, Renee. Who is the president and CEO at Salina Area Chamber of Commerce and Visit Salina. So we've been looking forward to hearing your presentation. Welcome to committee.
I'm sorry. Thank you. This is my first time. Do appreciate being here. As Senator Erickson said, I am the president and CEO of the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. I do bring with me a small delegation from Salina. I have with us our city manager from the city. I've got our executive director from the Airport Authority, Tim Rogers, assistant county administrator, Hannah Bett with the county, and then our executive director from the Salina Community Economic Development Organization. So with that, I'm going to fly through this slide deck presentation pretty quickly, just because I do want to allow an opportunity for questions if you have them. So we'll get that started. Next slide. Just a real quick introduction. I think everybody's probably familiar where Salina is located. We do have that nice little crossroads of I-70 and I-35. We are a population of 47,000 in Salina, but when you take into account the hub that we are for the region of 13 county labor basin, as well as healthcare, retail, entertainment sort of hub, that boosts our population to over 202,000 that we're really serving. Our community consistently outperforms expectations and punches above its weight through strategic investments and innovations that I'm going to talk about further. And we've also done what we feel is a really great job of leveraging public and private partnerships to achieve significant advancements in industry, education, infrastructure, and quality of life. Next slide. I'm going to just touch on a few of those areas. The first one's going to be economic development. Next slide. As many of you are hopefully aware, we've had a lot of our existing businesses really expand and grow over the last couple of years, and that's really where a lot of our economic development has come from. We've been able to recruit in a few new businesses, but really it's been our existing businesses that have shown us a lot of investment and growth. Next slide. Between Schwann's and Great Plains Quobota expansions, currently they are at over $1 billion in capital investment that they've made into those organizations. Over the last 5 years, we also had the recruitment of One Vision Aviation, which is a complete maintenance, repair, and overall MRO facility. And then there's been other smaller recruitments and expansions in Geoprobe, Repco, Superior Contracting and Manufacturing Services, and Beck's Hybrid that have totaled a little over $41 million in investment. State economic development tools and incentives like HPIP, KIT-KER, and JCF were critical in securing many of these expansions and added over 800 new jobs to the region in these last 5 years. And that was just those expansions alone. We've got a lot of other growth that has boosted us to almost 1,500 to 2,000 new jobs that we'll be bringing on in the next several years. Did want to touch real quickly that our expanded air service plays a critical role in both business and workforce retention and recruitment. Our airport boasts nonstop flights to both Denver and Chicago, so access is easy for both business and leisure travel. Moving on, next slide, in workforce development. Not unlike everyone else in the state and the region throughout the country. Because of this tremendous economic growth, we are looking for workers, and again, retention and recruitment is a high priority for us. Currently, we have 1,701 open positions representing 700 plus employers in Saline County alone. Our top 3 industries are advanced manufacturing, education, and healthcare. We have extensive collaborations. We have 5 post-secondary schools, again, just in Saline County alone, with Kansas State University, Salina, Kansas Wesleyan University, Salina Area Technical College, and then both the KU School of Medicine and the KU School of Nursing. So we work very closely between industry and education to make sure that those organizations are fulfilling local industry workforce needs to hopefully keep those students with us. We did receive an award of $3.325 million from the Kansas Department of Commerce in the form of the Aloft Grant to the Salina Airport Authority to create the Aviation Innovation and Maintenance Center of Excellence at SLN, which is a pre-apprenticeship program that helps get people into the trajectory of aviation maintenance career. And then we've got partnerships with all of our area schools to integrate job shadowing internships, really starting to expose students at both the middle school and high school level to careers that are available to them in the community. Moving on, community collaboration. Next slide. And then if you go next slide after that, the community has really invested quite a bit, again, in that public-private partnership, $160 million that we put into our downtown to help revitalize with entertainment venues, retail shops, restaurants, loft apartments, and a luxury hotel. This also included a streetscape for improved multimodal access and safety. We had the creation of a successful Star Bond district, as well as 3 community improvement districts and a tax increment funding district that are all performing above our projected numbers and helped provide funding for several of our tourism assets, the Stiefel Theater, the Alley, and the Garage. Our tourism and travel industry brings in anywhere between $8 and $10 million a year to our GDP. And then a couple of other smaller, yet just as critical investments. The $11 million we put into the Salina Fieldhouse, which is a programmable multi-sport and an event space in downtown, as well as $10 million for baseball and softball, $2.5 for a 12-court tennis complex, and another $1.5 for a 12-court pickleball complex. Next slide. Moving on to speak further to that urban development and really activating our core. Next slide. I'm sorry, you can go back to that. There we go, activating our downtown. So really wanted to speak to some of the other private measures that are happening, as well as some other funding. We've got the Canvas project. Hopefully you've heard about the Canvas project. It's providing large-scale murals all throughout our community's core. Our largest one is on the grain elevator we call Mural at the Mill, but these are all privately funded. We probably have upwards of 20 of these now in the core of Salina. We also do have a business improvement district. Salina Downtown Inc. is funded partially from that. That helps provide programming, outdoor concerts, as well as a new farm and art market that will start this year. Our sculpture tour is an 11-year-old volunteer-led initiative that places sculptures all through downtown, and that's curated annually. And then we do have those Lee lofts that are creating residence and housing downtown. 53 currently exist, and we're adding another 80. Overall, the Star Bond and special districts downtown have served as a catalyst for property acquisitions, redevelopment, and new business locations. I just spoke to our downtown executive director this morning. She said we're at 86% vacancy in our downtown. Next slide. We did want to talk a little bit about the innovation and technology advancement that really is the core of a lot of what we do in Salina. Next slide. This culture of innovation has led to a number of things. We had the General Atomics gift $10 million to Kansas State University Salina to fund advanced composites research and development. The Kansas Department of Transportation granted a $1 million innovation and technology grant to the Salina Airport Authority for a clean agent aircraft hangar fire suppression system. Our new Great Plains Kubota location on the south of town will house the engineering, research, and development offices for all of North America, located in Salina, Kansas. And then, of course, I'll talk more about KRE's project that we will be building here in this next year. But many of our advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and educational institutions promote a culture of innovation and have success in creating new economic development through further entrepreneurship and business recruitment. Next slide.
Renee,
Yeah.
if we could pause there.
Sure.
Before we get to challenges, let's just bask in the
I'm here for it.
positiveness of what you've shared with us so far and see if the committee has any questions at this point. Yes, Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation thus far. I just wanted to know, when you talk about loft apartments in your downtown, what does that look like? And does that fall into some kind of a housing plan for Salina?
Yeah, I'll speak to it real first, and then I may have Mike also speak to that. So it's the old Lee Jeans Building warehouse. So they're small apartments. Some of them are market rate, and some of them are low-income housing. There you got a LIHTC credit to create some of those. And as far as the overall housing plan, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, Mike.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity this morning, and I'll try to be brief, but we used RDG consultants around 2015 to do a housing study for the city of Salina. You may recognize the RDG name. They did the state's housing study as well, and they've updated it twice since then. We've stratified our population in Salina by income levels. We've identified the different housing price points, rental and owner-occupied, as well as different housing products. We've then stratified that in terms of what we need, and the loft apartments are an integral part of that identified range of housing that we've identified for the community. Initially, it was just kind of our typical growth. Then we had the economic development successes that caused us to revamp the housing study and update it and get more aggressive.
Thank you.
Mike, could we get your full name and title for the record, please?
Sure. Mike Scragge, SCHRAGE, and I'm the city manager of Salina, Kansas.
Thank you so much. Committee, any other questions so far? I will just say that I had the pleasure of spending the weekend this summer at your softball complex for my granddaughter's softball tournament. Unfortunately, they took second. That was a bitter pill, but I will say I shared with Senator Clays what a beautiful, wonderful complex with the playground and the setting. It was delightful. So congratulations on those projects.
Thank you.
Okay, now for, the challenges.
Yeah, challenges. So we are not unlike any other community here in Kansas. I think when we put housing and childcare at the very first priorities in terms of this economic development workforce is our number one priority, as I mentioned. And so housing and childcare really have become our challenges. Our housing crisis reached critical mass in 2021 with a dire lack of affordable housing. The City of Salina Housing Study, again, Mike mentioned that they have redone that again, indicated we needed 1,134 units by 2030, with 865 of those needed by 2025. So as he mentioned, we have had to get really aggressive with what we're looking at with housing. The city has utilized Rural Housing Incentive District for 2 housing developments, as well as moderate income housing grant assistance and the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit to create 452 units of workforce, single family or townhomes. A clear path forward for multifamily housing was critical to further workforce needs, and I'll talk more about that with the $25 million grant, that matching grant we were awarded. And then with childcare, and looking at childcare aware data, we're about 1,970 spots short of where we need to be with childcare. We have been very fortunate that our Salina Area United Way has really taken the lead in childcare in our community, and in working with them, we were able to create the Early Child Care Initiative Fund that allows our employers and our community members to invest. And then they also received a $1.87 million grant from the Kansas Children's Cabinet. So they are working at really wage subsidization for childcare workers, and that's that's something I'm happy to talk about more, but I'll continue moving on for the sake of time. Our legislative support. So as I mentioned, all of those economic incentives and tools have been very helpful to us as we've had economic growth and development, but certainly the last couple years we've received support from the legislature specifically for a number of those challenges. Next slide. So in 2022, we received that $25 million matching grant through the state to build 500 units of multifamily housing. The city has chosen a developer, and this project continues to move forward. We'd be happy to answer questions about that. And then just this last year, we were able to recreate Pure Imagination to the Kansas State University Salina campus. We're building a $41 million advanced spatial computing studio and learning center. This project will create 100+ high-wage jobs as well as serve as a catalyst for future tech company recruitment into Salina. And happy to answer questions about that. We are already attracting Department of Defense research projects as well as other companies. And again, just to reiterate that those economic development tools and these partnerships have been instrumental in our progress, and we are very grateful to the legislature for their support. It's also served to ignite private investment into our community and create further expansion. Next slide, future plans. Next slide. Just kind of on our agenda for this year is the Smoky Hill River revitalization. That's a $28 million project that will complement an existing trail system and just activate the river there in Salina, paddleboarding, increase traffic and commerce in the area as well. We've got infrastructure improvements for Magnolia Road that connects Kansas State University and the industrial complex at the airport to the rest of Salina. This includes hike and bike trails, street lighting, landscaping, public art, and other improvements. Then we've looking at infrastructure improvements for Holmes Road, which is over on the east side of town, that would create 1,264 new acres of developmental land for housing. It'll keep housing affordable by removing benefit district costs and allow for better design and maintenance of infrastructure because of the comprehensive approach. And then finally, we continue to want to build out our maintenance, repair, and overall MRO and paint growth as it aligns with the Kansas Framework for Growth, as well as this sort of three-city project for MRO growth between Nyar, Wichita, and Topeka. And then finally, seeking federal funding. We've created the AIM Center of Excellence at SLN. We just had our first class start last Monday. We're very excited about that program. And so seeking federal funding to continue to make that a sustainable project. And with that, I'll take a breath again and we'll stand for questions.
Well, you guys have been slacking off, obviously, with all of these projects. So, committee questions. Yes, Senator Dole.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. You talked about shortage in child care. Are you having shortage because regulations of getting child care centers opened?
I think that's a small piece of our puzzle. What we found in Salina when we were really dug into it and looked at it for us specifically was that we had space available in Salina. We were just not recruiting childcare workers to fill those spaces. And that really became our issue is that workforce piece of childcare. We looked at the data, and an average childcare worker in the city makes about $11.83 an hour. Which is poverty wage for Salina. And so really looking at trying to build wages for childcare without putting that on the backs of families. So that's really where our approach is. Now, I would say that, especially if you would talk to some of our centers and some of our in-home providers, there are certainly regulatory pieces that are obstructing growth as well.
Other questions? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I grew up in McPherson, so I'm pretty familiar with Salina.
I'm a McPherson native as well, so wonderful.
I think I might be a little older. We went to school together.
I'm actually older than I look, but.
Of all the wonderful things that you've been able to accomplish and with some legislative support. What do you think the most beneficial program has been for your community? Can you pinpoint one or two that you think
my crowd
has
needs.
been the best?
Yeah, I think overall the housing grant. I mean, certainly we were kind of dead in the water. I don't want to over dramatize, but in terms of especially multifamily housing, and so that really that $25 million matching grant really changed the game for us and being able to move forward in that direction.
I would wholeheartedly agree. It's not necessarily a program, but I would tell you our working with Department of Commerce staff has been incredible. They've been very supportive, very open, very responsive across all these platforms, and it's been refreshing.
Good. That is very good to know. Thank you.
And then, yes, as Tim just mentioned, we can't continue to recruit for jobs without the housing piece. I mean, that was one of the things we were getting back from our employers was that they were finding people, but they couldn't find a place to land, and so they were eventually leaving. So it's been a game changer.
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, congratulations. It was nice to hear of all of the progress that Salina is making, and just know you're not alone in your challenges. If that's any comfort at all, we hear that from a lot of communities that are struggling with the same issues, but it looks like you guys are on the right path, so congratulations and thanks for your presentation.
Thank you all for your time this morning.
Committee, next on our agenda, we are going to do final action on SB 430 that we heard. This is the workers' compensation bill, and we're going to just have a brief reminder from our advisor, Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, and I won't say much than you just did. We heard this in joint session on February 1st. I think the committee is familiar with the bill. This is a product of long and extensive negotiations by the parties involved, and to my knowledge, there's nothing in this bill that isn't an agreed compromise. So with that, stand for questions.
Any questions for Charles? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Senator Dietrich.
Madam Chair, I would move that we pass out Senate Bill 430 favorably.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Senator O'Shea. Any discussion? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Rarely or often we hear the term fast track, and boy, it definitely applies to this legislation. I had constituents and concerned citizens reach out to me. They're very upset. They're business owners. This is going to impact them greatly. I'm not saying we don't need to do something with the maximums, but let me give you a few examples of their comments. On page 2, extending the deadline notice to an employer by an employee for injury. This language is time critical for workman's comp cases reporting in the workplace injury. So it's very important to the employers and the employees. So I think this needs some work on that language. Also on page 25, it says that temporary partial payments for disability is moving from $155,000 to $400,000. This is a 158% increase, Madam Chairman. And he goes on. He's got several of these items listed. So I know we're working the bill today. I'm not prepared to bring amendments. I will not be supporting the bill as it is without addressing their concerns.
Appreciate the comment. I will say to the fast track, this bill has been in the works with stakeholders, with business being represented at the table, with all of the parties at this table for almost 2 years. So all of those, I was told, were seeking input from the stakeholders, including all the business owners. So I would just say fast track. I would not say that that's an accurate description, although I understand that once we have the bill, it's moved quickly. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have in my folder, and I know we had a joint hearing, but I don't have any information on 430 that I can find. And I always make notes during a hearing on a bill. That way I can know what I'd like, do not like. I do have a question, and this would probably be for our reviser. Thank you. Is this mine or just one? No. Okay. I always appreciate that about the committee assistant being straightforward with me, because she's, I've known her longer than I've known you, Madam Chairman. But I do have in my folder from last session, Senate Bill 38, which appears to be similar. Are they fairly similar? I guess my question would be to revisers, if 38 and 430 are similar, or if they are, because it looks like, without having just now received a folder, that they might be somewhat similar, because they do increase the maximum compensation for injured workers and permanent disability, and et cetera. And maybe, I know that's asking our reviser a question on the fly. He may or may not have an answer, but I was just curious.
Senator, I have not had an opportunity to compare those two bills, so I can do that and get a response to you, but at this point, I haven't really gone through them both.
I appreciate that, Madam Chairman. I didn't figure I could get an answer since I hadn't given him heads up. But anyway, now that I have the folder, I'll spend the next hour looking at it and determine if I support the lit. We do have an hour, right? I'm kidding.
If you can speed read, that would be wonderful. Any other comments or questions? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So according to these business owners, they were not represented at the table. They don't know who the negotiators were. They feel like it was two lawyers negotiating. And if I may, they're actually from your district, Senator Dahl. So they're pretty fairly large business owners. So they do have grave concern over this. I appreciate your work on it. I know there's been a ton of work. I've said my piece. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. That concludes our agenda. Oh, I will note, committee, that with your agenda, there was the fiscal note for HB 2570. That's the unemployment insurance bill. The fiscal note was not in your folder yesterday, but that has been now given to you. Tomorrow, we will start hearing the Department of Commerce budget. So with that, we are adjourned.